Hey everybody, welcome to the Back to Brilliance podcast. We're your hosts, Henry and Joseph. Thanks for tuning in. We ask that you subscribe, leave a comment or review. It helps great people like you find our podcast. And with that, we're going to get into today's topic. Today, we're talking about the bizarre power of gratitude before the win. In this episode, we tackle the seeing is believing delusion. And you're going to learn how to bridge the gap between thought and reality by giving thanks for your goals as if they already happened, forcing your outer world to reflect your inner state. So with that said, I want to go ahead and bring Joseph on. And Joseph, say what's up and take it away.
Hey everybody, how's it going? So today I wanted to talk about, just kind of about reframing how you view failure or setbacks or I haven't achieved my goal yet. We're as of today, recording at least, we're halfway through the year. We're 6 months into the year, and so, I saw this post on Instagram. It was like a guy. It was like a joke post, but it was like resetting. It was like a guy eating like a bunch of junk food, and he's like, "Oh, I'm resetting my New Year's resolution because I'm starting the half year off strong or whatever." It was a joke. Anyways, just reframing how you view setbacks, and a really powerful way of viewing a setback is being grateful for it, and also being grateful for what will become, or what is to come. Because if you're just like, oh well, I haven't achieved my goal I haven't achieved my goal yet, and you feel bad about yourself, and you're not grateful for what you have, that's very easy to slip down a slippery slope of, just viewing things negatively.
Absolutely. And that's kind of like how we're sometimes wired, right? We misinterpret like a setback on what it is, and I think a lot of times it comes down to how we like naturally view like the delays, or lost deals or obstacles. Sometimes we feel like that's a sign of failure, right? Like, man, I messed up, I failed. And with that, it's like you start to allow that to dictate, the future outcomings of what could happen. You know what I mean? So a lot of times what happens is that kind of reinforces things in your life, which goes down to, we'll call it subconscious poisoning, you know what I mean? Because a lot of times we carry that negativity, whether it was from past failures and we didn't learn, and the reason why I bring this up is like this is because we have to reframe the way we think of things. You know what I mean? Again, when we fail, it's never a fail, or if it, we won't even call it a fail. If it isn't the success you were looking for, then we classify it as a fail. So, with that goes down to our subconscious mind, and we begin to hang on to that, and sometimes we hang on to it for so long that, you're kind of like planting that seed, that's, you get what you expect. You know what I mean? It's a universal law of reaping and sowing. So, if you're planting seeds of negativity, then you're going to reap the benefits of that. You know what I'm saying? Like that's just going to produce itself. So what we're talking about today is planting the seeds of, gratitude and gratefulness before the win, and it begins to change you, from, the mindset of, oh man, I failed again, to instead of learning like, okay, what am I doing different that, I should change. So it always comes down to, again, to our mindset. And what we're talking about today is, just being grateful.
Exactly. And trying to stay out of that subconscious poison, because like Henry said, if you dwell on, oh, I haven't I'm a failure, or, things are not going as planned, then you just kind of, again, just dwell in the misery. But then then you become, then you give way to your victim narrative, right? The why me, we've talked about this before, but, whenever you give in to the why me, or why can't it be me, or why isn't it me, or, oh, someone else has something better, all the things that comes up with social media, the FOMO, right? You look at 20-year-olds and they're making millions of dollars, slapping each other on social media, right? You're like, oh well, why can't that be me? Or why do I have to be stuck at an Amazon worker job, right? At a warehouse job or whatever the case may be, right? And so then you kind of stop counting your blessings, and then it starts to become counting your losses, right? And so all that is just wasted leverage, right? Because you're dwelling on perceived unfairness, right? So again, for me, I could be like, oh well, one thing that I've kind of like held on to previously was a lot of the stuff I'm into, like making content or programming. I was like, hey, like there was a mindset that I had a couple of years ago, but I was like, hey, if I like I beat myself up because I've been into programming for years and I never really pursued it. But I was like, if I just pursued programming when I was a kid, whenever I was trying to learn it until now, like I would probably be a millionaire, right? And so boom, right there, like that is me holding on to my setback. But now I use programming almost every day. Granted, it's with AI, but I'm still able to use a lot of the tools and tricks I picked up along the way to help me with AI. And so, yes, it wasn't how I planned it to be when I was a kid, but I'm still living out that dream or that goal.
Yeah, and just to touch on that victim, mindset, a lot of times we get stuck in that trap because, either we were told certain things or we believed certain things, right? So, like, in order to change that from a victim mindset to a victorious mindset, all that has to change is the perspective on how you see things. So we're talking about kind of like a reframing protocol. It's when you make that decision that no more am I going to allow this to this delay, to cause me to fail or feel like a failure or not accomplishing the full success that I'm looking for. You know what I mean? So like when you reframe things and you take it, like this, like Joe's saying, if I would have just followed through, there's a saying that says, a good time to 20 years ago was a good time to plant a tree. The next time is now. Right. So like, time that the special thing about time, guys, in life, and this is from an older guy, so take my advice when I say this, time we take for granted, and a lot of times we just think, when you're young, you think, I got plenty of time, I could do it later. When you get older, in your 40s and 50s, you start to see like, damn, I'm halfway done. You know what I mean? And 60s to 80s, you're like, yo, it's kind of like, they get to do what they want because now they're retired, but at that time they're already tired, right? So time is like, we have a lot of time, but I think a lot of times we take time for granted, and those that there's a saying like those that are incarcerated, you know what I mean, they're actually more free than the people that are out here, because then they begin to understand and appreciate the time. But now they're stuck because of the decisions that they made, but there's a lot of programs and a lot of things that guys are doing and creating and changing, and they come out, and it's because of this reframing protocol, and it really stems down to the gratitude and appreciation that, you have these gifts and abilities. And I think a lot of times the reason why we don't see the success we really want is because we don't really go full force with it. Again, as foolish as this sounds, some people are even afraid of fear of success. You know what I mean? It's like, oh dang, things are going to change, I'm not going to be who I was, and sometimes that scares people, so but not to get off subject, back onto the point. The point is that like reframing the protocol, you know what I mean, for to move from the victim mentality to the victorious mentality is just start to practice the gratitude.
Exactly. And again, embracing the change, right? Embracing who you must become, because you have to allow the old self to crumble away, or, as Vernon Howard says, to die, right? You have to kill your own self, your old self, because like Henry says a lot of the time, what got you here won't keep you there. Or I forgot exactly what he says, but you can't keep doing the same thing. And even, even if you're successful, you can't keep doing the same thing because you have to change, you have to grow, right? So, what got you your first 10 clients will not get you your 1,000th client, right? So you have to constantly evolve and change. And so there's a constant inner rebirth that you're having to go through because, again, as you start reframing things, right? So right now, for me, I've been working on my business for a year now. And so, I've had some success for sure, but it's not at the pace that I envisioned, right? And so I can choose to look at it as a failure or a setback or why me or why this, but instead I'm choosing to say, hey, there's still a lot of room for me to grow, and this is a sign of it, right? So now I'm starting to analyze it and be like, okay, well, what do I need to do, and where can I go from there, as opposed to like, oh well, some people are making this much money, why am I not making this much money, right? Again, it's all about staying away from that victim mentality.
Exactly. And you've been around those people that have that mentality, the woe is me all the time, and it's draining. You know what I mean? So if it drains you, you know what I mean, and we do it, and I catch myself do it every once in a while, like and then I'm like, whoa. And it's not a full victim mentality, but it's always the little extra. So kind of like what Joe said in the beginning of this podcast is like, oh, these kids are getting slapped for $20 million or whatever. I can do that. You know what I mean? So that's kind of like a victim mentality complaint, right? Like you could actually do it and probably even better. You know what I mean? But the thing is because of so much reinforcement, feeling like I didn't succeed in this, then you fall into that victim mentality. And how do you get out of it? Gratitude, putting in the work. So the difference between you and that streamer and that person that you're seeing, that you're watching, is that they're putting in the effort, you're putting in the complaints. So I think changing the frame of mind and, getting rid of our old self, like Joe just said, that's got to crumble, right? The old way is not serving you. What got you here won't get you there. So in order to do that, you need to start planting the seeds now. So, taking podcasts like this, other podcasts that encourage, motivate, inspire, reading books, doing these things, this is what's going to help you to propel to the next level. But if you continue to do this, trust me, 5 years is going to go down the road, whether you did something or didn't. The only difference that's going to take place is where you're going to be at in 5 years. So today you have to mark that out and look like, hey, what am I going to be doing? Even with us doing this podcast, guys, believe it or not, life be lifing sometimes, right? And we get busy and we're like, oh man, but we stay committed. Why? Because we know that this is evergreen. This is going to help somebody down the road. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, a week, a year, 2 years, 5 years from now. We don't know. But I hope that this does bless you and helps you through wherever you're at, because we've been there, done that, and we're going to continue to go there. And now we just have the tools and the abilities and skills, and we're learning. So don't think that because we're sharing this, we don't implement this. Nah, don't get it twisted. I come back and I listen to some of this stuff and I'm like, oh, damn. Oh, shoot. All right. Then I was saying that I better own up to it. You know what I mean? So this kind of keeps us accountable, and this is like our inner rebirth, right? It's shaking things up. It's helping us to reframe things. You know what I mean? Is it comfortable? Hell no, it's not comfortable. You know what I mean? But is it bringing about growth? Is it bringing about change? Is it motivating us and moving us from victim mentality to victorious mentality? Absolutely. And we're doing it with gratitude, because the things you have to realize that things that happen are happening irregardless, right? So the victim mentality says, why does this always happen to me? And the victim mentality looks at it and says, okay, what can I learn from this? That I can benefit from, because history repeats itself. If you don't learn, you will go through it again. That's for sure.
Exactly. Yeah. And, just to touch on what Henry said about, looking through our past episodes, there's been times where, I mean, he'll jokingly say it, but, there's an element of truth behind it. I'll say something. He's like, hey, you should go back and look at episode, 21 or whatever. Right. So, it is the thing that we even use ourselves. Right. Because we always need reminders. Right. Even though here we are saying these things and sharing these things, we're still people too. We're still, we still fall victim to a lot of the things that we say, but it's about knowing about it and being able to share and work on it, right? Be a living example. And, something that I've really been emphasizing to myself and others is to stop believing the thing is believing delusion, right? Because, our mind is not meant to know the difference between fact or fiction, right? It's all from the mind. It's all comes from the mind, right? So, a dream can be reality, or reality can be a dream, right? And so, just being able to say like, hey, even though like Henry said, or the example that Henry gives, right, the old truck that he had, and then he envisioned a new vehicle, right? And so even though he was in the old box truck or whatever it was, he never let that um sway him from what he was trying to accomplish and what he saw. And for me, I'm in that phase right now, right? I see these things, I see and I feel these things, and just because I'm in the same environment that I've been in for the past couple of years, that doesn't mean that I'm allowing myself to just be like, oh well, it will never come, I'll never be this, I'll never be that. No, it just takes time, and good things that we want take time.
Absolutely. And that just comes down, to what he just said, about being in the same place. That's why a lot of times when you see somebody blow up and you're like, oh my gosh, overnight success. No, my friend. No, my friend. You've seen that, you don't hear the backstory, 5-10 years that it took working, grinding, the waiting game, you know what I mean? So the seeing is believing, that's why, like, when you're going to build a house, right? What's the first thing you put together? The blueprints. The house ain't built yet. So it's somebody's creativity. They put it down on paper. It's a blueprint. Then they hand it to a builder and the builder builds. So you might be just in different phases of life right now. Maybe you're in the creative space. Maybe you got to draw up your blueprints. Maybe you got to hand it off to the builder, or you're the builder. You know what I mean? So it takes time, guys, and don't let that delusion of, because you don't see it right now, it must not be the right thing. It's like, no, give it some time. Just like a baby doesn't come out the womb and in 2 days they're drinking a bottle, or walking, they're drinking their bottle, but I mean, like, they're not eating steak, they're not walking already, and in a week they should be running marathons. Like, it just doesn't happen. It takes time. So in everything else that we deal with, it takes time. So the seeing, believing, it comes by putting in the work, and then there's that gap of desperation. What do we mean by that? Like, we want it now. You know what I mean? So, like, be grateful in the moment, because when this moment passes, guys, and you hear it all the time about successful people, right? Like, all they wanted to do was get past that stage of life, you know what I mean? And get to the riches. As a parent, when you have your kids, it's cute when they're little, and then that, the terrible twos come, you're like, oh my gosh, plus you got life going on, right? And then 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, you know what I mean, 10, it's like, man, I can't wait till they're 18. And then when they're 18 and they move out, and they're 25 and they're gone, now your life changes, you know what I mean? So all the things that you thought like you really wanted, you realize, like, damn, this was my life. So we're all in different stages of life. You know what I mean? You may be starting, you may be in the middle, some may be close to the end, you know what I mean? But the reality is just that, gratitude is the key that's going to unlock success for you, So, I think that the vibration of lack, that we deal with is probably because, we're always looking at the negativity, you know what I mean? And the only thing you're saying is, I want to get the money. Well, you know what? Provide the value. And when you're grateful for the opportunities and the skills and the abilities, then guess what's going to happen? Other people are going to feel that same energy, and they're going to, give it back to you in the form of, support, networking, which is going to equal money. So, it's an energy, guys. Gratitude is definitely an energy. And, if you're not sure how it works, you could try it today. I'm just grateful for whatever it is. So like Joe was talking about my truck, I had a 87 Toyota pickup that I drove in the desert with no AC, and I'd be just driving, like, man, long day at work, coming home and just thinking of a vehicle, you know, and a particular vehicle. And in my mind, I would think about it. And, you know, when it happened, it didn't even hit me. I didn't even realize that I dreamt up this vehicle. But one day I was driving on that same highway, and I was driving with the air on, and it was almost in the same area. Not even kidding you guys. And I was just kind of like, oh damn. It like hit me like that aha moment, like what I envisioned I'm doing right now. That's crazy. So, you know, it does happen, guys. And I think it was just the change for me was gratitude.
Exactly. And again, there's a thing that I've been practicing a lot recently is before bed, I just give thanks for not only being able to live another life, or I'm sorry, live another day, but for the opportunity to live another day, right? Being thankful that you're alive and being thankful that you have an opportunity to, you know, live the life that you want, right? Even though, you know, you may be listening to this on your lunch break, you may be listening to this while you're breastfeeding, whatever the case may be, right? Maybe you're not living your ideal life in this moment, but the fact that you're able to have the opportunity to is something to be grateful for, because you know it's so easy to just kind of let go of life and be like, oh well, we'll see how things turn out, we'll see what next year gives us, right? You know, kind of like the football mentality, there's always next year, right? And so, you know, we check out of life so many times, but you know, just to be thankful every day, every night before bed, to be like, hey, I'm thankful not only to be alive, but to have another opportunity to have the life that I want for myself or for my family or whatever the case may be.
Absolutely, you know. And so that right there, my friend, is, you know, what we're talking about is gratitude, you know, and that's the key. You know what I mean? So if you're stuck right now, really just look at what's holding you back. You know what I mean? And see what's really setting you back right now. It's not the things that are happening to us. It's how we respond to them that makes the difference, you know? And that's going to help you, you know, through this illusion of failure, you know? So, what we talked about, you know, is don't allow those past failures to dictate your future, you know, because it becomes like a subconscious poison, and you just kind of allow it to, you know, grow and turn into something. And that something is like a victim mentality narrative, you know, where we're telling ourselves these things, and you know, it's not true. It's really not true, guys. You know, good things happen to bad people, bad things happen to good people, and vice versa, right? It's just a way of life, you know. Things just happen because that's the way it is. And I think the things that happen in our life happen for a reason, and I happen to believe that reason is for growth, you know, maturity, getting to that next level. That's what I feel, you know, these problems and situations that happen. So don't get caught up in that victim mentality, right? You can get out of it by just reframing, using the reframing protocol. And today we're calling it gratitude. Use gratitude to change the things around you. So just being grateful for even the simple things, guys. Try it. Just, I'm so grateful that, you know, I have this phone, okay, to be able to listen to this podcast, or to be able to make a phone call. You know what I mean? So just simple things, guys, you know, wherever you're listening, you know, and let the old self go, man. You know what I mean? If you want new things, like I always say, you're not going to get to that next level if you're hanging on to the old stuff. There's no room for new if you're hanging on to the old. So use gratitude. Let that be, you know, your key to unlock the success for you and yours. With that, I want to bring Joe back on if he has any closing thoughts before we close it out.
Yeah. Again, just like Henry was saying, allow yourself to just be like, hey, I may not be where I want to be right now, but that doesn't mean that I can't be grateful for where I'm at right now, because, you know, there is a lot of room to grow. Even millionaires, even billionaires, right? They always have room to grow. And so that is also something to be thankful for. But, you know, I want to give a shout out to our community. If you're an entrepreneur tired of doing everything alone, we have a community that combines self-growth tools, community support, and weekly structure to help you follow through with whatever you're trying to do. So let's add backtoBrilliance.com. If you scroll down to our community section, you'll be linked up with like-minded people like you.
Well said. All right, guys, with that, we want to thank you for tuning into our podcast. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a comment or review. It helps great people like you find our podcasts. And with that, we're out. Stay blessed till the next time.
Bye bye.